And welcome to the Dogfight, a podcast dedicated to the London Spitfire and Overwatch League. Fasten your seatbelts and observe the no smoking sign, because today we'll be discussing another turbulent week for the Spitfire, as well as their upcoming matches. But we do have some good news, and that is about the British Hurricanes. But we're saving that for the end, because we'd like to end on somewhat of a fun note. It's me, Havokpus, as always. I'm joined by Zoe. How are you, Zoe?
Hello.
Zoe. Sorry. You had a pause, and I thought you were just gonna go with the really hello.
Well, I was just going to say it's been a somewhat weird week, and I'm glad that I can discuss this with you guys on this podcast.
Yes, I always like dispensing my opinion and forcing people to listen to them, whether they like it or not. Well, before we jump into the matches, there is some news that was dispensed over. I think it was before the Valiant game, actually.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, so Bergering apparently has been suffering from a wrist injury, and it's forcing him to sit out. So I'm actually curious, could this actually be explaining his slumping performance from the Stage 2 playoffs to now? Because he definitely has been off his game in that period of time. Could it be that he's been dealing with like a wrist injury, and then he's trying to play through it, but then he put it to a point to where he really exacerbated it, so now he's having to sit out and go through this whole recovery period?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this really could have affected how Bergering was performing. I mean, he was obviously kind of psychologically down as well, so that really didn't help any matters. But I'm not counting this out at all, in that I think that this was certainly a factor.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. It does kind of suck because he is such a big personality for the team, and he does bring a lot with him, but hopefully he can get better soon.
Yeah, absolutely. When he is at his best, he is among the best players in the world, but we just never really saw that out of him. Well, I mean, we did, but we just haven't seen them out of him recently with Overwatch League. With the Stage 2 and Stage 3.
The slumping is not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that really quick, just because it is, important big news.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it works. Yeah.
Let's dive into the matches. So, first match was against Boston, and I gotta say that we threw that one, because the first half we looked so strong. We looked so strong in the first half, Zoe. And we had so many opportunities to close out, and we just didn't take them.
I remember at one point I was I feel so bad on Twitter. I think I may have jinxed everything, because I was talking to a friend of mine who was over in Europe, and he's just like, I'm going to bed hoping that we have knowing that Spitfire will have a great 4-0 victory. And I'm like, be careful, it might be 3-2. And it did be 3-2, so yeah. And also, it was an awful match on and off. We really, really suffered as, especially in the Koth maps, and in 3 and in 4, but we just couldn't. We really were struggling, and you could really tell that.
I was really questioning taking out Hagapen and Fury, because they were running pretty hot and they were looking pretty good. So the team had a lot of momentum with those that were playing. So I was thinking, like, all right, just keep them in. We have some good momentum going. Just let them work it out. It's fine. But then they put Bedosin and Wuhyal in, and then just on Junkertown, you don't even have to move the cart that far, and you're going into this really tanky triple tank comp in an Orisa, and you go, hey, Bedosin, can you play Sombra for us? So there's
the Bedosin on the Sombra was just not the best move. Like, honestly, yeah.
Shield couldn't get broken. Nothing could die. It was just awful.
Bedosin performs well on 2 or 3 heroes, and this is not one of them.
Exactly.
You could tell he
I
really didn't have much practice on the Sombra, that he really was sort of just got thrown into it, and it just really showed.
I do think though that I kind of pride myself in that. On the last episode, Zoe, if you recall, we basically said put Hurig in because he's more supportive, put Bedosin and Closer in with each other, and just stick with one consistent lineup throughout instead of having to do all these weird swaps. And
Yeah.
London actually did that this week. So I mentioned that they need to play Sombra. So I feel like they are listening to our
They've
show.
listened to us. Somehow, somehow the C9 gods have listened to us, and but unfortunately, it was just if you're listening now, C9 gods, you've not played the right Sombra, so yeah,
Not the player
took my
gods
advice.
who used to play for C9.
Yeah, I mean, you technically were. I mean, technically, yeah, Spitfire played a Sombra, but it wasn't really the Sombra I wanted.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then on Oasis, it's still a problem. Control maps are still our struggle. Even though you'd think we would do really well because we fight very well as a team, but we just really struggle with these control maps. My theory is that London really likes really flat, sort of spread out areas so they can really have a lot of room to maneuver. But with these control maps, they're very confined. They're in small spaces. There's a ceiling that they have to deal with. There's less maneuverability. There's less stuff that they can really
Absolutely,
do.
we certainly perform better when there is a lot of maneuverability, and certainly, we kind of see that out, and certainly we see that where we perform a lot better on especially 2CP maps, and especially 2CP and hybrid maps where it's just very open and there's not really a whole lot, and there's just not really a whole lot of things to block you, but just on control and sometimes even on payload, we've certainly been struggling, and we've just been blowing these maps away. And I'm just gonna get right into. Do you mind if I get right into Oasis?
I mean, go ahead.
We should have won that.
Should have.
Honestly,
I agree 100%. We had that in the bag.
We should have won that. There was a lot of. We had that in the bag. I'm not going to blame Prophet. I'm not going to blame Prophet. A lot of people have blamed Prophet because of that fairly. I think it was probably a misclick because if you get put under this high stress situation where you know that there's an attack coming that's fairly desperate from the Boston Uprising, where you can just sort of misclick things and sort of mispress. It just, unfortunately, that may, and I'm not going to say it was the cause, because there were so many other factors in the way that we lost that map so heartbreakingly.
Honestly, I think the issue was, sorry to cut you off, but I think the issue really was just, so it was ticking up to like 90%, and then Gesture, I guess, of course, goes, okay, we just need to stop them from touching the point. So Gesture being Gesture, dives super deep and tries to get the team to just hold them in their spawn. Unfortunately, that's not what you want to do because they're close. They're so close to all this healing. They don't have to worry about really dying or anything. So you're just kind of standing in their spawn, and then they get a couple of kills on you because you're super deep, and then they can just move on to the point and flip it when you only have a couple of people back. So I think it was
it felt like that was exactly what they did. Now, since I'm actually looking at the timeline of the fight, it feels like that's pretty much exactly what they did. But now we have, what really angers me about this is the way that we blew it, so heartbreakingly, that we could have won Oasis and brought back at least that. But it feels like there were no standout players on Boston compared to where we had Closer being good on the Mercy, and we had a lot of we had certainly a lot of players who stood out from the rest. There were no real standout players. Everyone, just looking at the stats now, everyone performed really average on the Boston Uprising. And that's just what heartbreaks me so much, is the fact that we lost to a team with, that's still okay, but B is the fact that, you lost to a team that didn't even perform all that well.
Yeah, what upset me about that match was just that we had, you're up 2-0 at the half after playing fantastically, I might add, in the first half. Everyone was working well together. Closer was doing really great. You have Hureg doing exactly what he needs to do. He's just supporting the team and allowing the more important players to get more resources. And then, you lose on, what was it, Nepal? They lose on Nepal. Okay, that's a control map. That's a mulligan. And then you have like the easiest opportunity, like the Junkertown scenario. That should be a slam dunk for you. You shouldn't even have to struggle that much. But they just don't cut it. And then you're looking good. Like the thing is, the team is actually looking really good on Oasis. Like if you watch their play, yes, they have given up rounds or have lost Oasis, but in the Boston Valiant games, and we can talk about the Valiant game a little bit next, because we are burning time, but they're playing.
I'm just. Do you mind if I just say one more thing about this game?
Yeah, but
one more thing. This is just one quick thing. One quick last note.
But they're what I guess to finish up, they're just playing really well on Oasis, but they're just not closing out, and you need to close out.
What seemed to me was what happened was just basically Striker used his ultimate, and it was not Striker, just effectively. So the Tracer used the ultimate, and now all of a sudden everybody's diving into wow, now all of a sudden you've got this really, really big fight where everyone is now using their ultimates that's lasting a heck of a long time. And, there's a lot of things that I could point out that were wrong in this timeline, mainly just because the fact that, as I've said, Gesture sort of dived in really far. And, the same way that I'm not going to blame this on Prophet, but the same way that ultimate also kind of, opened the door for the Coalescence to come in. Which sort of turned the tide of this entire game. So yeah, that's that. All right, so we're running really, really low on time, so that's just going to be.
Let's shift gears over to, I guess, a somewhat more positive note in the Los Angeles Valiant game. We did win.
We won Oasis.
No, it's a miracle. I was so happy.
That's all I need to say. That's all I need to say is we won Oasis. That I just can. It's good.
It was good. I think it was sort of the same thing, but they did keep to our notes of they're playing the Sombra more. Hureg, I might add, who looked fantastic on Sombra, and Sombra just fits his playstyle so well as being sort of this more supportive DPS that he just loves. So he looked really good on that. And they just kept this solid lineup all the way through. Bodosin and Closer, in my opinion at least, the ideal support line. Hureg stayed in the whole time. Yeah, of course, he sort of had to be. And they kept Fury in, so you just had a constant lineup.
Okay, so I'm kind of sorry to cut you off here. But what really, really made me happy was there were 9 players roundabouts, which is still an improvement. There were 9 players roundabouts in the Boston game. We stayed with the same lineup the entire time, which is it sort of became obvious that subs weren't the answer. So now now we're finally getting that consistent lineup, which I personally think with the way Gesture and Closer and pretty much just the rest of them are performing, I think that we could stick with this lineup for a very, very long time to come. Hopefully.
For sure. I think that. There's a synergy built up as well as just looking at raw skill. Really exploit that. I think my one complaint is that Hureg on the Widowmaker, I think, can sometimes be a liability. He's very good at just laying down damage on other hit scans. He's very good at being a nuisance on the Sombra, but with Widow, you really have to win these Widowmaker duels, and you have to be the one that's more picks than you're getting picked. And
yeah, absolutely.
sometimes he doesn't really win out on these Widow duels, and he's not as impressive as Birdring is on the Widowmaker. And I think that might be
There's no
one
denying that he
weakness.
is no Birdring in this case.
Yes, yeah, and I think that might be one of the few weaknesses. If we're sticking with this sort of core Spitfire lineup now, this is the new A squad, and we're going to be playing this just throughout.
I have to hope that Birdring will come back because, while I do quite like Hureg, it's just like it's quite clear that he's no Birdring on the Widowmaker, as you said before. And honestly, I would love to see Birdring in this kind of lineup, but I don't know. I mean, he'll be out for a while, so I am just really hoping that eventually we can get to see, this better Widowmaker, the Widowmaker play that we might actually need in this, because especially around these slower kind of comps, revolving around the Widow is pretty much where Birdring has historically just sort of thrived in.
Yeah, I do agree with that. But I think, other than that, the team looked pretty solid. They did struggle on King of the Hill again. Same old, I guess.
I can't even say that that's unexpected at this point. Because I don't have the statistics with me, but I do know we have at least a sub 250 record on King of the Hill maps.
I think going into Spitfire maps, I just automatically assume at the very least it'll be 3-1, because there's no way that we win the control map.
Absolutely.
Then what was the fourth map that we played against Valiant? I can't remember. It was Route 66, and we struggled to move the payload along. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you just cut out.
I was just mentioning that for the fourth map, we kind of also struggled to again move the payload.
Yeah, this is worrying for me because we already have many weaknesses on control and on these sort of King of the Hill maps. But now we might be bringing a similar weakness to especially payload maps because we saw with Route 66 that just struggle to push the cart, and we saw just, I think with how far that they got, it was just no problem for Valiant for Vala to just really push that. And it was. And am I surprised that we're struggling on a map like Route 66? Absolutely, surprisingly, saddeningly, absolutely not. But it's certainly something we may have to work on we may have to address in the future if this does not continue to improve. If this doesn't improve.
For sure. I think on the bright side though is one, we won Oasis.
Yeah.
But two, I think that we just got to win. And Valiant was surging as well. Valiant was undefeated until they played us.
Yeah, I just honestly have to say this though. I saw a lot of, and I still see a lot of potential in Valiant with the way that they're going. I mean, just this new squad is okay. I think personally, Soon and Kariv still stick out to me. Custa's been pretty below average, and surprisingly so has Bunny. But it just feels like there's a lot of potential in this lineup over time. But if Valve trade away half their roster like they did during the middle of stage 2, then all of a sudden you might just throw away this huge amounts of potential that might come out of this lineup.
I really like this lineup, actually. I think that it brings a fairly good mix of tangible and intangible factors. Custa, maybe not the best support, but from what I've heard, he's a very good leader in game.
Custa's an absolutely brilliant leader.
So he can underperform, but then still lead the team to victory.
Absolutely. It sort of reminds me of, I don't know who it was. this might be a bad comparison. Because I know nothing about Counter-Strike since 2016, but it felt like Custa reminds me a lot of Sean Garres from Counter-Strike, where effectively he might not have the best performance, but his attitude as a sort of tactical mind is certainly a asset to the team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're having some great leadership back behind some incredible DPS talent in Soon and Bunny. So I think that the tools are there. I think it's just a matter of them continuing to work well together. From what I heard, the previous Valiant roster, there was just a really bad atmosphere. Like everyone was just hating each other, and nothing was getting done because everyone hated each other.
Yeah, I mean, it was so surprising to me as well, because honestly, what I felt like was, it felt like everybody was effectively acquired in pairs, because, the rest of the old Immortals lineup were all good, and then the new additions of Soon and Unco, I don't think were likely to bring a problem, but apparently they did. So Soon's now on his own, poor dude, and it just feels like now since and something had to be done about the toxic atmosphere, and especially with I don't know who it might be, Envy, who did not know English very well and didn't adapt to the play and didn't and he seemed to be a bit almost a bit diva-esque from what I've heard, but it does seem like now that all these issues are now that it seems like we've got a new lineup, maybe they can focus on they can finally focus on getting this gameplay, making sure that this roster will perform at the best of their abilities. And honestly, what I think I think they will probably get if they're really, really, really going to continue to surge like this, they can possibly end up in the top 3, but I'm thinking that they'll probably end up in 4th. Just my personal prediction.
I'm not sure.
Overall, not stage.
Yeah, for sure. I think, for me, I'm not sure about placement, but I think that in terms of playoff teams for right now, I think Knox would probably be like NYXL, Philly Fusion.
There's no denying Fusion are going to get in.
Oh yeah, Fusion have turned it around and looked great. I think also Boston has looked really well.
Boston are second overall somehow right now. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, you literally just lost your main DPS player, and somehow you're managing to go even better than you were before. It just boggles my mind that Mistakes was the biggest piece that was missing seemingly from this entire from Boston, and now it just seems like they're surging, and it doesn't seem like there's any stopping them. But the good news is that team is I think first in stage 3 and second overall, and the fact that we were barely able to pull out a win over them and we were barely able to pull out a win over second, maybe that just brings a bit of optimism to me, because we've got slightly lesser opponents for this week.
Yeah, and actually an interesting point before we move on, just to kind of add to the interesting situation of Boston, they came in the preseason, everyone ranked them pretty low. They're like, oh, this is just kind of
I did too.
This is a hodgepodge roster filled with like no-name talent for the most part. They are not going to go far. And then stage 1 they look good. Stage 2 they're looking a little better. Stage 3 they come out like a rocket. Dreamcasper who? It's time to put Mistakes in and get the ball rolling. So the narrative potential in and of itself is astounding.
Yeah, what personally for me, that was I remember preseason, I think it was preseason podcast, the first time I was on this, I said, who the hell was Note? Now Note is actually one of the best tanks I can think of right now. So I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I can kind of not blame myself for that, but it also feels like you literally just lost your main DPS player, and you just, well, I'm just gonna say you literally just lost you know who, and now we're final, and now just everything appears to be better without him, low key. I
Yeah,
don't understand how
exactly.
they've somehow even managed to get better without you know who on the team.
Yeah, it's pretty astounding. Let's move on to our match previews. So for week 4 of the third stage, we have a couple of opponents that I think is at least an easier time than last week. Thursday, April 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern, facing off against LA Gladiators, and then Saturday, April 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern, we got San Francisco Shock. So, what are you thinking, Zoe?
All right. So I'm going to say these. All right. Do you mind if I get both my predictions out of the way first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh yeah, go ahead with
Oh,
the
sorry.
predictions.
Discord is being weird for me right now. So, LA Gladiators are still looking really dang strong. I'll have to admit, despite the fact that they're out of an overall playoff position right now, and their record is exactly. Wait, is that? Yeah, that's exactly 500. It feels like now. It still feels like they are a very strong team, but I still feel like they should be able to. I mean, I'm not going to say easily win, because I pretty much just jinx every single thing when I say easily win, but I feel like they should be able to at least pull off uh, quite a bit, of a lead against the Glads. Because I mean, honestly, I love the Glads. I love their squad. It feels like they could have a lot more if they really just put their minds to it. And you can really tell Fissure's fall into place, and now it just feels like everybody on the team has found a sort of place. Uh, Everyone knows what they're doing, despite the fact that their team was kind of a hodgepodge from the start. And I think we could probably do well, but you still have to watch out for such a dangerous team like Glads.
I agree. I think with Fissure in the lineup, it makes it really difficult to deal with because he's such a smart shot caller,
Yeah,
and
Fissure.
he's just so good at bringing
He's
everyone
also,
together.
yeah. I mean, Fissure, the most handsome man ever to live, is still he's still an extremely smart guy, and there's no denying that we lost a lot when we lost Fissure, and we're starting really now to see that, and we've saw that for almost 2 stages now with the Glads, where we're seeing Fissure just pop off, and now I'm just thinking, why did we give the top-rated tank in Apex S4 to someone who is now using him and is now just this force to be reckoned with? Just
Yeah, yeah, it's depressing, and I think also Surefour has just been looking great. Their DPS
yeah,
has been looking really stellar lately as well. I think.
yeah. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
I
I mean, you
think.
kind of cut out there, so I couldn't really tell, but all right. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that most of the issue with Gladiators will be working around Fissure and how he coordinates his dives and such.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen Gladiators kind of slump recently. I mean, I guess they had two of the. I mean, I guess I can't really say the word slump because they had two of the toughest teams you could possibly face in week 2, and that's kind of just stunted their record a bit. But overall, I still think that this team is still a force to be reckoned with, and I still think there's a lot of danger behind these guys. Barely. These guys have just cut it close every single time against these top teams like Vala and NYXL, and just hoping for the best when it comes for the Spitfire.
Yeah,
I
same
think this
here.
game's going to be close.
Hopefully they can win though.
Yep.
Moving on to San Francisco Shock, I don't know where to place them. I think they've had some good showings, but they've also had some kind of showings. I think they're struggling to really incorporate all of their new players and trying to figure out something that works. Like Sinatra will play a little bit and he'll look kind of okay, and Architect will play a little bit and he'll look kind of okay. And
I
I
mean, I'm
think they're
going to be
just
honest. I kind of like the Shock. It's okay. I mean, like they have a few players that they're not trying to use, but overall, it still seems like they're just meh now. I mean, even with Architect, I mean, Moth has been really a surprise for me at how well he's been occasionally performing, and now it seems like maybe we'll get Sinatra in for a few. Yeah. Okay, now Dante, now it's your turn. Maybe we'll bring back Sinatra again for another map. Yeah. Yeah, overall, it feels like they're still kind of disorganized, and that's the sort of problem that very much plagued them in stage 2. I mean, it felt like they've always felt this kind of like disorganization and general just general mediocrity, but it feels like the mediocrity is lesser now because, well, A, they've managed to get a win over the Glads, and B, the fact that they're right now, I mean, I feel like right now that the fact that they're a playoff team in stage 3 really shouldn't say anything about them. They've had they've had fairly weak matchups all except for there's been 2 upsets, which I've always thought the Shock was a team with high upset potential. And that's the thing we have to look out for. But they've barely managed to win over the goddamn Dragons, and it felt like it feels like the inconsistency there is even stronger than the inconsistency we currently have in the Spitfire. Like, what are we going to see? Are we going to see the team that drops a map to the Shanghai Dragons? Or are we going to see the team that 4-0'd the Fuel and managed to upset the Philly Fusion? Like, I don't know which one we're going to see, and that makes it very difficult to predict this next match.
I agree. I think that when you get that crazily inconsistent, it makes them a wild card, and I don't like wild cards. I like easily predictable things, and
Yeah,
it makes it hard.
yeah. By no means was the terms shock and predictable even close to relational to each other at this point, because it just feels like they have been wildly inconsistent, which has landed them, I guess, in the stage playoff points right now, but I doubt that will stand much longer, especially with the matchups they have this week. But it's still a really, really confusing thing to me. It's like, will we see the one that gets crushed, or will we see the one that manages to pull off an upset? I don't know, and it makes it pretty much impossible to predict. So I'm going to still say Spitfire wins, but there's still a very high upset potential.
I think Spitfire will win. I think they're just smarter than San Francisco, even in
Yeah,
their current inconsistent form. So I think it shouldn't be too bad.
well, well, I'm just gonna say this in terms of inconsistency. If you think London has it bad, you ain't seen the Shock, man. They have been inconsistent all stage. I mean, they were kind of inconsistent previously, in which they mainly sucked, and then they just had a bit of an upset potential now and here and there. But now it just feels like they're just inconsistent straight up, and now it just
Well, we will have to see this weekend. Before we sign off, we do have some final bits of good news. The British Hurricanes played, and They swept Young and Beautiful off of their feet in the EU Contenders playoffs.
Let me be honest
It was a
here.
slaughter, Zoe.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was a slaughter. It was an absolute slaughter. For that one, yes, it was a slaughter. And honestly, I have to give full props to Young and Beautiful. They had a good squad full of good people. I mean, I can't really say. I mean, I'm gonna say Tsini, and Tisani, and Shatter 2K, and Dempsey are all great players that I absolutely want. It just feels like they didn't mesh together in that current lineup, and it really did show. Despite the fact they managed to get third in that Group B, it just felt like they didn't stand a chance against Hurricane, and especially with Hurricane, with how they're doing right now, with Craggy, with people just the way that they're performing right now is just blowing my mind.
I think the thing that really impressed me was when they whipped out the quad tank
Yeah,
composition.
the quad tank was
It
a
felt like
surprise.
it felt like it violated a few sections of the Geneva Convention with just how swiftly and brutally they would just come swinging in, get that Moira ult charged up, and you just have a coalescence beam coming through, and
Mhm.
a Reinhardt swinging around, and just it's like a meat grinder or something. They just dropped like flies, and it was just so
It was so
crazy.
unfortunate. I mean, I'm going to say this. I don't know when the LAN finals are. I think that's probably like a week, 2 weeks from now. Yeah, it's 2 weeks from now. Well, 2.5. And I guess we'll get into more of that when we have when there is more when that week comes up. But I'm just going to say this real quick, if you don't mind that I stick to EU Contenders.
But yeah, go ahead.
Um, what really, really disappointed me this entire dang time was was just how was personally what disappointed me was Eagle Gaming. Eagle is an okay squad. Okay, like I can't deny Nico and Nox and Super Pluke and just every single person I like in French Overwatch, well, with the exception of a few, are on this team. And they get swept by Giganti immediately, which is not the way you want to go. And especially because there might be an Overwatch League team in Paris next year, this might not be the team they want to have either. But, full props for every single team, especially Angry Titans, who really surprised me this entire time. I did like Onigod and I did like AFox, but I didn't really know how good they were going to be until that time. And certainly Orglis and Hungry, uh, without an org and without any support at all, they managed to pull off an absolute beastly run in Contenders. I mean, I'll admit that was kind of the Shaxx hard carry for a lot of the time, and Shaxx truly deserves to be on an Overwatch League squad at this point, with the way that he's performing. But certainly, I feel like now that we have all the LAN finals, we've got 2 weeks to wait, and hopefully British Hurricane can pull out some good results against
I think they
Cisco.
will. They have been one of the few like wrecking ball teams in EU Contenders where they're
Yeah,
just smashing the competition.
yeah. I mean, they weren't quite as wrecking ball as Eagle in Group B, Bible Thump. But it certainly felt like it certainly felt like they were wrecking such lower teams as that's a disband. So
Yeah, I think at least it shows that there is still some really good competition in EU, and that
absolutely,
it does incentivize people to buy into European slots. So hopefully the European scene can grow by the time that London actually has to move to London.
yeah. I mean, honestly, what I felt like was there was a lot. I've had my eye on the Overwatch scene since gotta be getting on for. I don't really know how long it was from when EU was dominant at one point, but now we finally are seeing exactly what's happening with and now we're finally seeing the amount of competition that we have over there, perhaps, this is just me being hopeful, but maybe in the next 2 or 3 years we can have a whole European division with maybe 6 or 7 teams on it, and I'm hoping, just hoping, that will be a possibility maybe within the next 3 or 2 years. I mean, just hoping. Maybe build a studio in Europe like what Riot did and call it good. Heck
Yeah,
yeah, I'd pay money to see that.
for sure. I mean, I'm hoping that they at least have a couple in France, a couple in Spain, a couple in Germany, maybe another team in
Denmark.
England or like Ireland or something, somewhere in the UK.
Honestly, I think the Spitfire could probably. Well, honestly, this is what I have. I think that honestly, a team. There's lots of esports organizations that call London home. A second London team wouldn't be too bad, especially because there's lots of esports organizations like Method or Fnatic that call London home. And certainly, if you had one of those, there'd certainly be a lot of cross-brand appeal. And especially when it comes to an American org, a KR roster, and a EU slot is a bit weird. Maybe they can be. Maybe in the next 3 or 4 years there can be something slightly more natural. I want to say. I don't know if that's the correct word to say here.
I don't know, but I guess to cap off the discussion, definitely need to see more European teams because there's a lot of really talented people in the scene that I think are definitely Overwatch League worthy, and they just honestly need a place to get signed.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, there's a lot. I mean,
the British Hurricane roster just as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Fincy leave mid-season, which was all right. I mean, like, Fincy was, I think, if I'm correct, the only player that left for... No, Cruz left for North America as well. Was the only really player that from EU Contenders that left. And certainly, I would love Fincy on my team. I mean, he's just such a great player, and especially if Havokpus was involved in some point, I would just I'm sorry, I'm just a sucker for Icelandic players at this point.
Well, I think we're gonna finish the show with that little soundbite. So please put your tray tables up and return your seats to their full upright positions because we're coming in for a landing. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and we hope to see you in the skies real soon.